The moment my son-in-law changed the locks on my own front door, he didn't say a word to me. He just handed my daughter a new key right in front of me at my own kitchen table and said, "There you go, babe." Like I wasn't sitting 3 feet away. Like the house wasn't mine. I had owned that house for 31 years. I wanted to understand what kind of house it was. Not grand, not anything anyone would write about. A 2-story in Barrie, Ontario, with a side door that stuck in winter and a backyard that flooded every spring in the corner near the fence. I had painted the porch railing myself the summer my husband passed, not because I knew how to do it, but because I needed something to do with my hands in those first weeks. I chose a deep green. Everyone said it looked nice. I never told them I had cried the entire time I painted it, just standing there in the August heat with a brush and a can of exterior latex and nowhere to go with the grief. That house was mine. 31 years of mortgage payments, of scraping ice off the driveway alone in January, of calling the plumber at 7 in the morning because the pipe under the kitchen sink had given out again. My daughter. I'll call her my daughter here, the way I've always thought of her, as simply mine. She called me in March of 2022. Her voice had that particular tightness it gets when she's about to ask for something she already knows is a lot. She and her husband had been renting a place in Guelph. The landlord was selling. They needed somewhere to go while they sorted themselves out. Uh, just for a little while, she said. Maybe 6 months. They'd pay what they could. I said yes without thinking twice. Of course I said yes. She was my daughter. Her husband, I had tried for years to like him, and I want to be honest about that. There was nothing obviously wrong with him. He worked in logistics. He had opinions about sports and municipal politics and the best route to take on the 400. He called me by my first name from the very beginning, which I had told myself was just a generational thing, a casualness, nothing to read into. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't dramatic. He was just a man who had never in his life considered that a room he was sitting in might belong to someone else. They moved in on a Saturday in early April. I helped carry boxes. My daughter made soup that first night, and we ate together at the kitchen table, and it felt, briefly, like something good. By June, his hockey gear was in the garage where I used to park my car. I started parking on the street. I told myself it was fine. It was fine. By August, he had started watching television in the living room from the moment he got home until well past midnight. I would come downstairs for a glass of water and find him there in the dark, with the volume up, and he would not turn it down, and he would not say good night. My daughter would be upstairs already asleep. I would fill my glass and go back up and lie in the dark in my own bedroom and listen to the sounds of my television through the floor. I want to tell you about the Wi-Fi because that's when something in me started to quietly change. One morning in September, I sat down at the small desk in my bedroom to pay my bills online, and my laptop wouldn't connect. I tried everything I knew. I called the internet provider and was on hold for 45 minutes before a very patient young man told me the password on my account had been changed. Not the account itself, just the network password. Someone in the household had changed it through the router settings. I went downstairs. My son-in-law was in the kitchen making eggs. I asked him very calmly if he had changed the Wi-Fi password. He said yes. He said the signal had been slow and he had reset it to improve the performance. He recited the new password to me without looking up from the pan, like it was nothing, like the network was his to change, like I was the guest. I wrote the password on a sticky note and went back upstairs and sat at my desk for a long time without doing anything. This is what I want to say to anyone who has been in a situation like this. It is not one thing. It is never one thing. It is the garage and the television and the Wi-Fi password, and the morning you come downstairs to find your percolator has been replaced by an espresso machine that takes up half the counter and no one thought to ask you. It is the way your daughter stops meeting your eyes at dinner. It is the birthday in November when you mention you'd like to have your friend Colleen over, and your son-in-law says without hesitation, "We've got people coming that weekend." And when you say your birthday is on a Thursday and Colleen would just be one person for one afternoon, he says, "We'll figure something out." And nothing is ever figured out. Colleen came in December instead. She sat in my kitchen and drank tea, and I kept the door to the living room closed, and we talked in lowered voices, and I felt like a visitor in my own home. In January, he started working from home 2 days a week. He set up his equipment in the dining room. The dining room. I had a dining room table I'd had for 22 years, a solid maple set that had belonged to my mother-in-law and that I had refinished myself one summer. He put a monitor on it. He put his headset and his cables and his work papers on it. He put a ring light on a stand then next to the china cabinet. I said to my daughter quietly, could we perhaps set him up in the spare room instead? The spare room was on the main floor, a small room I had used as a sewing room, but it had a closet and a window and an outlet. She said the spare room didn't have good enough light for his video calls. I didn't say anything else. I need to tell you about February, because that was the month everything shifted. My friend Colleen had been telling me for months to speak to someone, not a therapist, though she'd suggested that too. She meant a tenant lawyer. She kept sending me articles on her phone and showing me the screen, and I kept telling her that my son-in-law and daughter weren't tenants, they weren't paying rent, it wasn't that kind of situation. And she said, very gently, that it didn't matter, that Ontario had specific rules about people who occupied a property, that I should at least make a call. I finally called on a Tuesday afternoon in February while my son-in-law was at the office and my daughter was at work. I sat in my car in my own driveway to make the call, which should tell you something about what my life had become. The lawyer was a woman named Ms. Traylower. She had a measured voice and she did not waste time. I explained the situation. I told her they were not paying rent. I told her it had been almost 2 years. She asked me a series of questions, and then she said something that I have thought about almost every day since. She said, "You don't need a reason. It's your home." Under Ontario law, because there was no formal lease agreement, no rent being paid, no tenancy established, they were not legal tenants. They were what's called licensees. People who occupy a home with the owner's permission, and permission can be withdrawn. The process was not without steps. There would be a formal written notice, a specific number of days, the possibility of a small claims process if they refused. But the law was clear. The house was mine. I was allowed to ask them to leave. She said I didn't need to be there when the notice was served. She said I didn't need to explain myself. She said to let her office handle it. I sat in my car in my own driveway for 15 minutes after we hung up. It was a cold afternoon. The sky was that flat white it gets in February in Ontario, not quite overcast, not quite clear. There was a salt stain on the front walk that I had been meaning to clean up since Christmas. I thought about my husband, about the summer I painted the railing, about the fact that I had lived alone for 7 years after he died and had never once felt smaller in my own home than I had felt in the past 22 months. I made the appointment. That night, my son-in-law came home from work and went straight to the kitchen and began making dinner without asking if I had eaten, not offering to make extra, just cooking for himself and my daughter as though the kitchen were theirs, and I was simply someone who happened to live nearby. My daughter came down and set 2 places at the dining room table, the maple table with the ring light still standing beside it, and they sat down together, and I stood at the top of the stairs, and I understood, in the clearest way I had in a long time, that I had let this happen by degrees, by small surrenders, by telling myself it was fine. I went back to my room and called Colleen and told her I had spoken to the lawyer. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Good. About time." The notice was delivered on a Thursday in March. It was a Friday morning when my daughter called me. I was at Colleen's, which was where I had been spending more of my time lately. My phone buzzed on the kitchen table, and I looked at the screen and looked at Colleen, and she reached over and turned off the kettle so the kitchen was quiet. I answered. My daughter's voice was not the tight version I knew. It was something else, lower, like she'd been awake all night. She said, "Mom, what is this?" I said, "It's a formal notice to vacate. You have 60 days." She said, "You can't be serious." I said, "I'm very serious." There was a silence. I want to tell you what that silence felt like. It did not feel triumphant. It did not feel triumphant. It did not feel like revenge. It felt like something cracking, quietly, in a way that could not be uncracked. I was not glad. I was not angry. I was just tired and clear, and more certain than I had been about anything in 2 years. She said, "He's furious." I said, "I imagine he is." She said, "Mom, we don't have anywhere to go." I said, "You have 60 days, and you both have jobs. You'll find somewhere." She said something then that I have thought about since. She said, "You never said anything. You never told us it was a problem." And I said very quietly, "I know. That was my mistake. But I'm saying it now." She hung up. He called me himself an hour later. He was not quiet. He told me I was being irrational. He told me this was family, that family didn't serve each other notices, that I had ambushed them, that I had involved lawyers in something that should have been a conversation. He told me, and this is the part I come back to, he told me I was lucky to have family who had stayed with me so I wasn't alone. I let him finish. I had learned, somewhere in the long, quiet months of that house, how to let people finish. Then I said, "The notice stands." He hung up. My daughter did not call again for 11 days. When she did not mention him at all. She asked if I was all right. I said I was. There was a careful politeness to the conversation, like two people finding their footing on ice, neither wanting to fall. She told me they had found a rental in Kitchener. She said the move-out would be the second weekend of May. I said, "Thank you for letting me know." I drove back to the house the week before they moved to collect some things I had been keeping in the car, my gardening books, a bag of wool I had bought at the craft store in the fall, a box of photographs. I had moved out there when the dining room became his office. I let myself in through the side door. The house smelled like his cooking, like the particular spice blend he used for everything, and for a moment I stood in the hallway and felt the full weight of the past 2 years. Not anger, not vindication, just the weight of it, solid and real. I looked at my dining room table. The ring light was still there. The monitor, the cables, the papers. My mother-in-law's table buried under his life. I made myself a cup of tea in my own kitchen, standing at my own counter, using my own kettle, the one I'd had since before my daughter was married, and I drank it looking out the window at the backyard. The corner near the fence had started to thaw. It would flood again soon, the way it always did. I had a bag of gravel in the shed that I'd been meaning to use to improve the drainage. Maybe this year I would actually do it. They moved out on a Saturday morning. I was not there. Colleen and I drove out to Wasaga Beach for the day, which I had not done since the previous summer, and we walked on the beach in our coats and ate fish and chips from a paper bag sitting on a bench, and it was cold and bright and completely ordinary, and it was one of the best days I had had in longer than I could say. I came home that evening to a house that was mine again. The ring light was gone. The monitor was gone. The espresso machine, gone. There was a faint mark on the maple table where a cable had scratched it. I ran my fingers over the scratch and decided I didn't mind it. Tables are meant to be used. I set 2 placemats, and the next day Colleen came over for lunch, and we sat at my dining room table and ate and talked, and I did not lower my voice once. I moved my car back into the garage that night. I sat behind the wheel for a moment after I turned off the engine in the dark of the garage that smelled like winter and motor oil and familiarity, and I thought about what the lawyer had said. You don't need a reason. It's your home. I need to tell you something about my daughter. We are, carefully, slowly, finding our way back to each other. She calls on Sunday evenings now. The first few calls were careful and surface level, the kind of conversation you have when you're both circling something neither of you is ready to name. But 2 months ago, she said to me, I should have said something to him. I knew. I could see how it was, and I didn't say anything. I didn't tell her she was wrong. I didn't tell her it was fine. I just said, I know. And I didn't say anything either. We both have things to work on. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, yeah, and somehow that felt like more progress than anything that had come before. He and I have not spoken since the phone call. I do not imagine we will for some time. I do not have warm feelings toward him, but I also don't spend my energy on him. He is not the point of the story. He was never the point. The porch railing needs repainting. I noticed it last week. The deep green is fading in one spot on the corner post, the way paint does after enough winters. I bought a small can from the hardware store, the same color I used the first time. I'll get to it this weekend if the weather holds. I don't know if I'll feel anything when I do it. I don't know if I'll cry the way I did the first time, standing there in the August heat all those years ago, painting through grief. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll just paint. Maybe that's enough. To stand on your own porch, in front of your own door, doing the ordinary, quiet work of maintaining a place that is yours. You are allowed to take that back, even after 2 years, even when it's your family, even when it's hard and it costs something and no one tells you that you're brave for doing it. You are allowed to choose your own home.